This is not just another fish tank. This is a project that has been months in the making, houses some of my all-time favorite fish, and has been testing my patience over and over again. And in this video I'll show you everything from setting up the tank to adding the fish. All of it began when I found a free sump online. I have no business owning such a big sump as it's bigger than most of my tanks, so I decided to remove all the dividers and turn it into an aquarium. I also decided it would be best to reseal this tank, so I removed all of the old silicone, taped off the edges for cleaner beads, wiped down the seams with isopropyl alcohol, applied the silicone, removed the tape, left it to dry for 48 hours, and did a water test. And now we have a clean canvas to work on. For the vision I had in mind, I felt it would be best to drill through the glass, add some bulkheads and run the filtration like that. I then ran my tank under my shower to get rid of some debris and I bumped one corner and a small crack appeared. This may seem harmless, but once the tank is full of water, pressure will begin to build and the glass will break. I had no other option than to replace the entire plane of glass. This meant the entire tank had to be disassembled, as new silicone won't stick to old silicone. While cutting through the silicone, I used a bit too much force and broke a second plane of glass. I ordered 2 new planes of glass and a week later they arrived. I laid down some sheets of paper to make cleanup easier, taped off all the edges for cleaner beads of silicone, wiped down all the seams with isopropyl alcohol to get rid of oils and debris, and then attach everything together. On a side note, I'm using this small piece of glass as a brace and added 2 more to either side of the tank so it can hold a lid later on. These pieces were cut from what originally were braces that span the entire length. I really wish I thought this through a bit more because in retrospect I would much rather have these lengthwise braces. You'll see why later on. Anyway, once the silicone had cured, I added a self-leveling foam mat underneath. Flipped the tank back upright and once again marked for the bulkheads. However, right before drilling through the glass, I decided against using bulkheads. These stick out pretty far, which means I had to move the entire stand for the aquarium forward about 10 centimeters. The thread on the inside also doesn't run all the way, which means I can't cut off any excess to save space, as this will prevent the elbow from screwing in correctly. The only other and way more obvious option would be to use the filter inlet and outlet that came with my canister filter. These will run up and over the top of the tank, which is slightly less appealing, but it will work just fine. This meant it was now time to make sure this thing could hold water. Yeah, I dropped the tank and I was frustrated. Oh boy was I frustrated. I really felt like giving up. The project just wasn't working out and I wasn't really sure what to do. But then I remembered. I had some beautiful fish that deserve a beautiful aquarium. I remembered my vision for a lush river stream. Two weeks later, the new plane of glass arrived. Everything is clean, everything is ready to go. So let's do this. This tank measures 130 centimeters long, 35 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters tall. Due to these odd dimensions, I had to modify the filter's inlet and outlet to fit properly. I also switched out the filter's original outlet for a spray bar. I'm going to use the Flufol 207 to keep this thing clean, and I'm seeding it with pre-cycled filter media to jumpstart the nitrogen cycle. Next, I cut a lid from a piece of corrugated plastic. And then put another piece of the same corrugated plastic in the tank to help distribute the weight of the rocks. With all of that out of the way, it's finally time to start making the hardscape. I'm going for a lush river aesthetic. To accomplish that look, I'm using river rocks and 2 pieces of driftwood. I had a general idea of what I wanted to create, but you never know if it's really going to work out until you see all the pieces in the tank. In this case, I kept fine-tuning all the pieces for over an hour to get everything just right. And I'd say this is the most important step. Whatever we decide right now will dictate where everything else will go later on. So it's important to take your time and make sure you like what you're seeing. Once I was happy, I used pieces of paper towel and super glue to lock the wood to the rocks. This will prevent the wood from floating once we fill the tank with water. But will also make maintenance much easier. I tried to glue everything together in places that won't be seen later on, but some of the contact points remain visible. These were covered in more super glue and then covered in play sand to conceal the glue mark. Next, I stuffed filter wool between all the rocks to create a barrier between the foreground and the background. Some of the plants I plan on using will send runners, and this will make it a bit easier to contain everything over time. Like I said before, I want to create a lush river stream. And to sustain such an ecosystem, we're gonna need a rich, nutritious substrate. I decided to go for a multi-layer approach. The first layer will be dirt. I sifted this to remove the bigger pieces, and I've let this soak for a couple of days before use to get rid of any air bubbles. And if you want to learn more about using dirt in your aquarium, I recommend you read The Ecology of the Planet Aquarium by Diana Wallstead. I wanted to only place the dirt in the 2 islands I've created, but due to the water some of it creeped forward. But that's not really a big deal. Next I added some Tetra Complete substrate. This was added wherever I planned on adding the plants. And on top of this I added an entire bag of Easy Life root sticks. I did break all of these into smaller pieces for a more even distribution. Finally, I kept all of this with a thick layer of play sand, which I've rinsed off before use. Now before continuing the hardscape, I did add a shallow layer of water. And that's because I've decided to use this plant right here. I've used this plant before in some setups and I found it is quite hard to keep this plant down. So I'm gonna try to plant it in a shallow layer of water and then sprinkle a little bit of gravel over top to keep it weighted down. I then added more gravel all over the setup. The gravel I'm using came from an old aquarium and has some of the same Tetra substrate mix mixed in. On top of this I'm adding some small pebbles and coarse gravel to help blend everything together. It's starting to look pretty good, but let's make it pop with the plants. I did get quite a lot of plants to make sure this would become a lush river, and I decided to split them up into 3 batches. In the first batch are all the epiphytes, which means these plants don't really like to be buried in the substrate and much rather get nestled between the hardscape. These were nestled in cracks and crevices all over the aquarium, being mindful of plants I wanted to add later. And to keep these in place, I glued them down using cyanoacrylate superglue. Usually I'd work in the exact opposite order, starting with the biggest plants and working my way down. However, since I decided to use so many epiphytes and superglue not really working properly underwater, it made sense to change things up a bit. And I must say, I actually really like doing things this way. The second batch holds all of the mid-ground plants. These mainly include varieties of Cryptocoryne, but there's also some other stuff. I place these along the river rocks to soften up the edge for the background plants. And for the final batch of plants I have all the background plants, mainly Vallisneria. I think I ended up using 14 bundles of this plant. I planted all of these on the right island where they'll be in front of the spray bar, and my hope is to see the leaves dance in the flow. For the left island, I cut up some stem plants. These might seem a bit too short for now, but will grow rapidly and create a dense foliage in no time. And in between these two, I ended up planting another crypt. Next, it was time to fill up the tank and add the first fish. To start, I added 5 dwarf neon rainbows. I thought at this point I could relax and enjoy my creation. But little did I know, this tank was a ticking time bomb. The next day, when my girlfriend came to look at the tank, she immediately noticed something was wrong. She started pointing at the tank, and that's when I noticed. Oh man. The center brace broke and the glass started bowing. If you ever run into this yourself, drop whatever you're doing and start draining the tank right away, as this can very quickly become a huge disaster. Luckily, all of this happened during the day while I was in the room, so I could act quickly. I guess it was caused by the fact that I cut my center brace about ½ centimeter too short and decided to bridge the gap with silicone. By emptying the tank halfway, all of the bowing stopped and I could remove the old brace. I decided to replace it with a new, much wider brace. This alone probably would have been enough to fix the tank, but I decided to double down and also add 2 lengthwise braces. These were pretty hard to cut, which made me wish I had kept the original lengthwise braces. Anyway, a couple of days later, all of the silicone had cured, I could fill the tank up once again and finally start enjoying my creation. Over the course of a couple weeks, I slowly added more and more animals to this tank. For now, this tank holds 15 cherry shrimp, 10 amano shrimp, 3 bamboo shrimp, 6 hill stream loaches, 5 dwarf neon rainbows and 10 harlequin prospora. Coincidentally, all of these fish are from Southeast Asia, which gives this tank a little biotope flavor, which I think is pretty cool. Even though this tank gave me a lot of headaches along the way, I'm super happy with how this one turned out and I learned so much. The tank still isn't done though. I want to add some sliding doors up here to really frame everything in. The plants also still have a lot of growing in to do, which takes time, just as it takes quite a lot of time to make these videos. If you want to help me get them out a bit faster, please consider supporting me on Patreon. And if you enjoyed this video, then I'm pretty sure you'll also love learning about my spotted turtle. I'll see you there.